Hey there, welcome back to the Steely Dan 64 project. In this series of videos, I'm sharing my personal ranking of the 64 songs released by Steely Dan during their classic period from 1972 to 1980. Here's my premise. Not one of those 64 songs sucks, but I do enjoy some more than others. So let's talk about the songs I ranked from 56 through 49. Glad you're here. I'm Swan Shadow. Welcome back to the nest. In this video, the second in this series, we're going to cover the songs I've slotted from 56 through 49 in my ranking of Steely Dan's 64 classic period songs. If you're curious as to which songs came in at 64 through 57, there's a link to that video in the description below. Just a reminder, this ranking is strictly a representation of one guy's personal opinions about these songs, coming from someone who's been an avid Steely Dan fan since the 1970s. Your order can, will, and indeed should be different from mine. We all feel music in our own personal way, and that's okay. There are no right or wrong opinions here. That said, here's my song number 56. Song number 56 is Throw Back the Little Ones, the 10th and closing track on the 1975 album Katy Lied. This is a jazzy little number, no pun intended, featuring another of the many spectacular guitar solos that Elliott Randall contributed to Steely Dan records, starting with Reelin' in the Years. Randall did so many of these stellar solos that it's easy to take them for granted, but let's not. Give the man credit for being the sensational stylist that he is. Now, I didn't rank this one higher mostly because Fagen's vocal here is not one of my favorites, but I really do enjoy his piano playing on this track. It's playful in a way we don't get from Donald very often, and the horn break at the bridge is kind of fun. It's a decent tune overall, plus it has that fine Elliott Randall solo going for it. And did Becker and Fagen ever write a more self-aware lyric about their own music than this one? Hot licks and rhetoric don't count much for nothing. I'm not throwing this one back. Song number 55 is Fire in the Hole, the 7th track on Steely Dan's 1972 debut album, Can't Buy a Thrill. I mentioned earlier my appreciation for Donald Fagen's piano playing. He really doesn't get enough acknowledgement for the subtle brilliance of his keyboard work. Here on Fire in the Hole, he is razor sharp. And as good as Fagen is on this initial effort, his chops mature and develop over the course of future albums. It's really the secret sauce in quite a few Steely Dan tunes. As for the song itself, nothing in popular music sounded quite like this in the early 70s. The one exception might be Marvin Hamlish's soundtrack to the Oscar-winning film The Sting, which showcased the music of legendary ragtime composer Scott Joplin. There's a little bit of that Joplin feel in Fagen's piano riffs here. We'll get some additional ragtime references in future recordings. Also, there's a nifty guitar duet with Denny Dias and Jeff "Skunk" Baxter playing almost in close harmony. It's probably something I'm going to be saying a lot, but it's incredible the level of musicianship that this band had. And it was still a band at this point. But they demonstrated that musicianship from the very first album, which is amazing. Phenomenal to me how cutting edge they were just right out of the gate. Song number 54 is East St. Louis Toodaloo, track 5 on Steely Dan's 1974 album Pretzel Logic. In compiling this ranking, I really puzzled over where to place East St. Louis Toodaloo. At one point, I considered omitting it altogether. It's an unusual item. It's the only all-instrumental number in the Steely Dan 64, and it's the only track not written or co-written by Becker and Fagen. So it's officially the only cover tune in the Steely Dan repertoire. Composed in the 1920s by Duke Ellington and Bubber Miley, it exists here only to showcase Becker and Fagen's affection for jazz, an affection that would morph into an obsession starting with their next album. And I suppose it serves to fill a bit of space on Pretzel Logic, which contains a higher than usual percentage of very short songs. Ultimately, I decided to leave it in the rankings because I really do get a kick out of it. I love the weird guitar work. You have Walter Becker playing the melody through a talk box to simulate a muted trumpet, and Skunk Baxter using a pedal steel to provide an interesting twist on the original arrangement's trombone. I mean, who does that? It's really a bizarre interlude in the middle of a pop rock record, but it's also a tease as to some of the directions that Becker and Fagen were about to take Steely Dan. Maybe it's just an odd footnote in their discography, but, you know, it's fun. Song number 53 is My Rival, track number 6 on the album Gaucho, released in 1980. I actually remember sitting in my college dorm room listening to Gaucho in its entirety for the first time. When My Rival came on, I thought, ew, that's kind of a creepy song. I didn't know until decades later that Becker and Fagen had created this weird little number for the soundtrack of a horror film. The film is called Phobia, and it was directed by the legendary John Huston. Kevin Thomas, who at the time was the film critic for the Los Angeles Times, called Phobia, quote, the worst film ever directed by a winner of the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Award, end quote. And ouch. Knowing the horror film origins of My Rival explains the song's gooseflesh-raising vibe. Sadly, it doesn't make me love it any better than 53rd. But, you know, it does have a few things going for it. The horn section is superb. It's led and arranged by saxophone stalwart Tom Scott, and features such notable players as the Brecker brothers and Wayne Andre. The great Steve Gadd, one of my all-time favorite drummers, holds down the kit, and the equally great Ralph McDonald is on percussion. Rick Derringer and jazz funk all-star Hiram Bullock show up on guitar. Valerie Simpson of Ashford and Simpson is the female backing vocalist. So some fantastic musical talents contributed to this recording. It still creeps me out though. Song number 52 is Pearl of the Quarter, the 7th track on the 1973 album Countdown to Ecstasy. I'm already on record. Go back and listen to my comments on Brooklyn Owes the Charmer Under Me at number 62, as not being all that enamored with Steely Dan's early dabblings in the countrified end of the musical pool. Still, I've got to say, there's something ineffably sweet about hearing Donald Fagen sing a more or less straightforward love song. Okay, he's in love with a streetwalker here, I get that, but he's in love nonetheless. It's not my job to judge anyone's love or life choices. You love who you love. Skunk Baxter and his pedal steel guitar get another opportunity to shine here. The man truly is a master of the instrument. But yeah, for me, a little of that country stuff goes a long way. Song number 51 is Only a Fool Would Say That, the 5th track on the 1972 album Can't Buy a Thrill. This is one of the brighter, bouncier tracks on Steely Dan's debut. It showcases some deft-fingered guitar by the Skunk, and a lead vocal by Fagen that actually sounds as though Donald was in a good mood that day. It's one of only a couple of tracks on Can't Buy a Thrill where Fagen shares the lead with the soon-to-be ousted David Palmer. And it demonstrates that once Donald gained confidence in his own singing, he really didn't need a more prosaic vocalist like Palmer to lean on. The upbeat tone of this track masks a typically pointed lyric, one aimed at a young man looking at life through rose-colored glasses, one who sees a world become one of salads and sun, a world where all is free, and then smacks him down hard with the reality check of the title. Only a fool would say that. The fact that a song this cool checks in this far down in the rankings is testimony to just how much excellent stuff lies ahead. And in case you're wondering who that idealistic young man was, it's John Lennon. This song was Becker and Fagen's answer song to Lennon's most famous solo track, Imagine. Song number 50 is Third World Man, the seventh and concluding track on the 1980 album Gaucho. This is the final song of Steely Dan's classic period, and it's something of a ringer. It was an emergency fill-in for another number entitled The Second Arrangement, which Becker and Fagen, along with producer Gary Katz, thought might be the best piece on this album. Unfortunately, most of the recordings for the second arrangement were accidentally erased by a studio assistant. Becker and Fagen made several attempts to re-record the lost track, but they couldn't recreate the original magic to their satisfaction. So instead, they did what you do in such circumstances. They dusted off a song they'd written for the Asia sessions 3 years earlier, swapped out most of the lyrics, and gave it a new title. Hey, when life or a butterfingered engineer hands you lemons, you go looking for that random packet of Kool-Aid in the back of the pantry, and you squeeze those lemons into it. On the plus side, there's some awesomely gritty, snarling guitar by Larry Carlton on this track. Man, I love that guy's work. We're going to talk more about Mr. Carlton in future episodes. But as it is, Third World Man remains a square peg hammered into the ultra-smooth pop jazz round hole that makes up the rest of Gaucho. If you're curious, you can search YouTube and find some salvaged recordings of the second arrangement and decide for yourself if you think it would have been a better choice for this album. But the truth is, since we can't hear it exactly the way Becker and Fagen wanted us to hear it, we may never know. Our last song for this round, song number 49 in our ranking, is King of the World, the closing track on Steely Dan's 1973 album, Countdown to Ecstasy. Most of Steely Dan's music has a timeless feel to it. Songs that were recorded more than 40 years ago still sound fresh today. King of the World is an unfortunate exception to this rule. The electronic keyboards that feature so prominently here have that sort of cheesy 1970s exploitation flick vibe stamped all over them, which is too bad, really. Painfully dated keyboards aside, the band contributes some super tight playing on King of the World. Drummer Jim Hodder in particular shows some exquisite chops here. And personally, I find the post-apocalyptic storyline of the lyric super intriguing. Although some people think of Steely Dan as music for nerds, there isn't really a lot of science fiction in their work. It might have been cool to see Becker and Fagen explore more of this type of thing. In fact, Fagen does this to some degree on his solo recordings. It's that tantalizing hint of what else might have followed this that leads me to rank this song where I have it. And let's be honest, when I came of age in the 70s, I cut my teeth on exploitation films and lo-fi science fiction. So this one's admittedly a bit of a nostalgia pick for me. There you have it, the songs I've ranked from 56 through 49 in the Steely Dan 64. In our next episode, we'll investigate songs 48 to 41. You'll find a link to that video below. Now, while you're still here, it would be sporting of you if you'd tap that thumbs up to like this video. And while you're tapping, why not subscribe to this channel so you'll be sure to see all of our future content. Thanks ever so much. Until next time, be well and stay steely. And hey, is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car.